Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Shauna from Creating the Made, and today we are going to take a look at modeling clay versus Play-Doh on the gel plate. Now, you guys know how I love to do my Play-Doh printing, and if you don't know, I'll post a link to an entire playlist up top so you can check that out. But I like to do gel printing with Play-Doh. It's a technique that I developed, and it is something that I use quite often. But I've been asked more than a few times how modeling clay would work in place of Play-Doh, and I wanted to test out a few theories. So let's check this out. Fun stuff ahead. Stay tuned. Okay, let's take a look at the items we're discussing here today, the modeling clay and the Play-Doh. Now, most of us know Play-Doh. We're familiar with it, especially if you have or had small children. Now, it is soft, it is pliable. We know Play-Doh, right? Play-Doh is mostly made from organic materials such as flour, water, and it may or may not have some mineral oil or what have you. Whereas modeling clay is a polymer based material generally. It can also be oil based, especially the modeling clay that we are using, which is this Crayola brand over here to the side. It is oil based and it is designed not to dry out. Whereas Play-Doh, if you leave Play-Doh out, it will dry, it will get hard and crusty. Now, the modeling clay comes in many different sort of brands. That's Protolina, which I got from my Hobby Lobby, and there's also like Plastilina and Plasticine. Like it just comes with there are a lot of different names that it goes by, but it's all essentially the same stuff, right? It is a little more resilient than Play-Doh. It is a little harder, as you can see me squeezing here. It is actually a lot harder. It's not as easy to sort of manipulate as Play-Doh is. And as I said before, it does not dry out, whereas the Play-Doh will. Those are the main differences between these two. But I've often had people ask me whether they are interchangeable for gel printing purposes, and I kind of wanted to check it out. Now, we will need to obviously imprint onto these substances. That's what I use Play-Doh for the most part, is taking imprints off of items and then using them to transfer that pattern to the gel plate. So we will have to get a feel for this modeling clay and try to get our best imprints off of it. I came up with some tips and tricks, so let's take a look. First, I'm just going to roll out an imprint on both Play-Doh and modeling clay, just to sort of see how each of them operate in a way that I would use it. Now, I use these things to take imprints of items that I don't want to press into paint on the gel plate. And so this is how I would use them. I'll roll it out. I have it sort of cut down to a specific shape, and I'm using a clay roller here to imprint onto the Play-Doh. Very easy, very simple, pretty cool print there. Link in the description if you're interested in those rollers. Now I want to do the same thing with the modeling clay, and as you can see, I was able to get, or maybe you can't see that because there's a lot of glare on that white that white clay, but it was very hard to roll out. So I've discovered that you have to heat modeling clay, or at least this particular brand, or well, all of the modeling clay I showed you, the Plastilina, the Plasticine, the Crayola, like all of them require it to be heated up before it is pliable enough to do what I was trying to do with it. And I mean, some of them, especially the one I got from Hobby Lobby, it gets a little funky once you heat it. Like it's a lot easier to manipulate, but it starts to like sort of leave a residue and sort of get a little bit on the sticky side. But from what I can tell, that is totally brand based. I think that one I got from Hobby Lobby just it wasn't really that great of a of a modeling clay. I didn't like it anyway. And honestly, I'm using this in a way that is probably abnormal for modeling clays, in that I'm using them to apply paint or remove paint from a gel plate. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt, but there are certain brands that will work better, from what I can tell. And as you see, once I softened it up, it rolled out very well, comparable to the Play-Doh. So I was happy to see that. It's a little extra work, but I was happy to see that I was able to get a good imprint in that modeling clay. So now I'm just taking some prints and I'm taking them both on the same plate so you can see sort of the comparison. And right away you can kind of tell that the Play-Doh took off more of the paint. So it's a cleaner pull of the paint, and so it kind of is, for me, more desirable because I want a cleaner puller. You can see just looking at that there's more paint removed by the Play-Doh, so there's a lot more of the white paper showing through, and there was a lot more of the blue paint left behind, using the modeling clay. But you know, as I did this, I learned a few things about, both of these substances. So hopefully, here's one tip that I tried. I let it dry for 1 minute. I let the paint sit on the plate for 1 minute, and I even hit it for a little bit with my heating tool. And then I tried taking another set of prints with the same Play-Doh and then the modeling clay. And it was still not all the way dry or as dry as I wanted it to be. So I waited a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And the drier the paint got, the better the modeling clay pulled the paint off. Now there is just a really fine line here because a few seconds too long and it's too dry and it won't pull off at all. So it was kind of difficult to find. You can see at the bottom how much more white is showing there in the middle, which was the drier paint. And I don't know, it was just kind of weird, like trying to find the appropriate sort of amount of time to wait. But I sort of get a little bit more information the more I keep playing with these materials. Now I think here I'm just going to play around a little bit. This is one of the things I liked about the Play-Doh. Is that it's a lot easier to roll out a larger sort of image size. Like I'm going to use this on the 5x7 plate, so I wanted it to be roughly 5x7 in size. And so with the Play-Doh, it's a lot easier to sort of get that larger size. You can just roll that out or add multiple jars of Play-Doh together to even get an 8x10 size. I think the pile of Play-Doh I was using for a very long time was 4 jars of Play-Doh, and I was able to get very large sized imprints with that. And so as you can see, that roller I used made a really nice looking print using the Play-Doh. And that came out well. That came out sort of as expected with the Play-Doh. Now, what I did here, this is just a brown color of the modeling clay, and I'm just going to take a print using this trim. I think it's just called a pearl trim. It's like you can find it in the ribbon section at the craft store, but it's just a pearl like trim, and I'm just pressing it. I'm giving it some good pressure, pressing it into the modeling clay to make myself a printable pattern. I really actually like this trim, and I ended up using it with the Play-Doh as well, as you'll see later. But this particular print gave me additional information about how to get better prints with the modeling clay. Now you see that paint I used there was my Lucas Krill paint. I used the same brand for all 3 colors, and I made a little ombre pattern there. And I'm just using you saw it twisted there. I'm using my modeling clay to pull it off. The modeling clay is a little harder than the Play-Doh. It's a lot harder than Play-Doh. And so it tends to slide in situations where the Play-Doh doesn't. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But you can see there, it's blurry because it slid and it didn't pull off the paint as well. So I went right back in. I wanted to test a theory. The golden fluid acrylic paint dries a lot faster than a lot of my other acrylics. So I wanted to see whether using a paint that dried really quickly would work better with the modeling clay. And as you can see, that is a much cleaner print than the one we were just looking at with the Lucas Crow acrylic, where that acrylic stays wetter longer. And so as you can see, using that golden fluid acrylic, I got a much better print with the modeling clay. Now this is my golden fluid acrylic in black, and so I wanted to test the theory. And is it cleaner just all the way around? It's cleaner print with the modeling clay. Is it cleaner with the Play-Doh? And what I found is that they're opposites. You can see this did not really pull off very cleanly at all. There's a lot of dinginess in the print. And so I went in with I think that's Master's Touch, a different brand of acrylic. A brand I know it stays wetter longer. And I used the Play-Doh with that to see what would happen. And you can see the clear difference there. That is a much cleaner print than the one I used right there with the golden fluid acrylic. So excuse me. It is weird. They are opposites. The Play-Doh prints better using a acrylic paint that is more open, that has more open working time. It stays wetter longer. And the modeling clay is the opposite. It worked much better with the golden fluid acrylic, which I know it's very thin paint. It's fluid, so it's a thinner layer and it will start to dry fairly quickly. And so as you can see here, it wasn't quite very dry the first time at the top, and you can see a very clear difference between the top, which wasn't very dry, and then the middle and the bottom, which had just a few more seconds even to dry, and the difference is very stark. So I'm still learning about these things, but there's that print there with the modeling clay. Oh, and one thing, that modeling clay that I just used for that print was a different brand. It was the Plastilina, and I think it worked fairly well. So I did want to test this too, because people do ask me about this, whether you can print with air dry clay or Play-Doh that has been left out to dry, and you will get your answer here shortly. But generally you can, but it kind of works the way you think it would. Like, it is brittle, so as you can see right there, it's more prone to breaking. And one of the things that makes the Play-Doh and the modeling clay work fairly well on the gel plate is the give. Like, the fact that it has some it has flexibility to it, that it has the ability to get, work with the flexibility of the plate to remove that acrylic paint and get a nice clean image. So although hard Play-Doh and air dry clay will work, the stamps that you get are not as durable as is ideal, and it is more difficult to get a clean image because it's more difficult to manipulate the stamp. That I'm using the word stamp obviously for this piece of air dried clay there. It's just more difficult. I think I was using a different paint there to see whether it would make a difference, and I feel like the golden acrylic one, which is that one right there, kind of came out the best. But so long story short, you can use air dry clay, but it's just not necessarily the best method. So here we are. I'm going to do sort of pros and cons of each one of these, starting with the Play-Doh. One of the biggest pros for me with Play-Doh is it is very easy to manipulate. It is extremely easy. It's so soft and it's so easy to get a great imprint. And you can also make large size imprints easily. I discussed that a little bit, but if you want to go up to 5x7 or even 8x10, it's so easy to just add a few more jars of Play-Doh and you can roll it out very simply. And it's easy to do redo imprints. That means like if I'm done with the print that I just made and I want to roll it up and do another one, it's so easy to actually get that done. And finally, Play-Doh is cheap and accessible. I mean, you can find it almost anywhere, and it is as low as 50 cents a can. Obviously, that's very cheap and accessible. Now, one of the cons with Play-Doh is that each imprint cannot be used repeatedly. Now that just means like when you roll out a pattern on the Play-Doh, you can't take print after print after print after print because eventually the imprint will start to degrade because it is very soft, right? So it will just sort of start to flatten out and won't be as high quality anymore. Now another con is that you don't have the flexibility to just store the Play-Doh however you want. It needs to be stored in an airtight container or it will start to dry out. Now, this is what I'm calling a neutral point because it's neither positive or negative. It just kind of is, and that is what we saw during the print session. Is that the print quality of the Play-Doh imprints is affected by the paint brand, and so it may be hard to figure out which is the best paint for you to use. You just kind of got to try out what you have and see which one works the best for whichever one of these you're using. Okay, so we've gone on to the modeling clay, and the first pro with the modeling clay is that the imprints are durable and sturdy. It's kind of the opposite of the Play-Doh, right? Because the Play-Doh is very soft and the modeling clay really isn't. But what that means is that the pattern you roll out is going to last longer. You're going to be able to keep it and kind of make print after print after print if that's what you want to do. And with the modeling clay, you don't have to worry about it drying out because that's not what it does. It is an oil-based product, and for the most part, that's what it's oil-based and it's designed not to dry out. So you don't have to worry about the way that you're storing it the way that you do with the Play-Doh. Now the next pro for modeling clay is you can take an imprint and save it. So you can kind of make your own stamps in this way. You can take an imprint of a pattern or something that you find out in nature that you really like, and you can keep it. You can store it and keep it, unlike the Play-Doh, which is so soft that it's really sort of not designed to be kept. Okay, so with the cons of the modeling clay, obviously you saw this. It was difficult to manipulate. It is really quite hard. Now, different brands may be slightly more malleable, but I found the 3 brands that I have were all pretty difficult to manipulate, especially as it is compared to the Play-Doh. And another thing is it requires additional equipment. Obviously, it required a heating tool to sort of get it heated up enough to where it can be manipulated. And so if you don't have that, that could be a little difficult. Another thing that is a con about the modeling clay is that it can be a little bit expensive. It is not as accessible as the Play-Doh. I think that the container of modeling clay, the Crayola brand, was $9.99 for that box, whereas Play-Doh, you know the price of Play-Doh. Again, the neutral is that the print quality is affected by the brand. This was a little more negative for me with the modeling clay because it is just a touch more difficult to figure out the right sort of dry time for the paint to get a good pull off of that modeling clay. So all in all, I think overall, is modeling clay a good substitute? Can it be a substitute for using Play-Doh on the gel plate? And the answer is yes, absolutely. You can use modeling clay. Several different brands are available to you, and if you are specifically looking to take a print of something and keep it, like use it as a stamp and use it over and over and over again, and maybe just have a permanent imprint, so to speak, then modeling clay is a very good option to do that. But I have the modeling clay, and there are situations where I might use it, but I think for the way I like to print, I like the quickness and the ease of the Play-Doh, so I'll probably continue to use that most of the time. So I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, please go ahead and leave a like, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I hope to see you guys next time, and in the meantime, keep creating and making. Bye bye.